Hi everyone, today I wanted to show you how I make my base bodice pattern using Seamly 2D. Seamly 2D is an open source pattern drafting program that's completely free. I use Seamly 2D to make all my patterns and I have been doing so for a few years, so I do quite like it. I will make sure to leave a link below so you can also download the program if you want to. So what I will be doing today is showing you how I begin to make all my patterns, all my custom patterns, be it for cosplay or regular clothing, and that's with starting with a base bodice. So let's get right to it. To start my pattern, I open Seamly 2D and I click New. This will open a little pop-up box where you can give your pattern a name. Since this is just an example, I will leave the name as Draft Block 1. And for the units, you can choose between centimeters, millimeters and inches, but since I use centimeters, I will be leaving it at that. Once I've done that, Seamly creates the pattern piece and gives me my main point A. This is a starting point from which you will begin drafting the other lines. Once the pattern file has been created, you can insert your measurement file. So Seamly 2D has an integrated app named Seamly Me, in which you can make your own measurement list to use them for your calculations. I want to show you the difference between sizes, so I'll be using a multi-measurement size file. You can import your size chart by clicking on the measurement tab and navigating to your file. Now you can use those measurements for all your calculations. And now, even though nothing seems to have changed, if you look to the top left, you will see that my measurement file is now next to the pattern file name. And that's how you know that your file was loaded correctly. Even though this is just an example, I will save the file to my desktop in case something goes wrong. So you should often save your work just in case, because you don't want to be halfway through a pattern or even worse, almost done, and then suddenly lose all your work. So remember to often save what you're doing. The first measurement starting from point A is the back height. I'm making this pattern in a European size 40, so this is 18 centimeters. This measurement is according to my size chart. I will also be indicating the names of the points so you can know which point is which. From the back height, we need to go up a little bit so we can add some ease for easier arm movement. So this is a fixed number of 3 centimeters. Pattern making is kind of a mix between fixed and custom measurements. If you want to know which measurement should be fixed and which should be custom, I do have a full course available in my Etsy store and on my website, so you can learn how to draft this bodice from scratch with and without fitting for your own sewing projects. Once I have drawn my back height and measured those 3 centimeters upwards, I have to indicate my back waist length. So measuring from point A and using the measurement for my size chart, I indicate my back waist length. Now from that back waist point, I again need a line upwards to help me fit the bodice later. So I will be measuring upwards 5 centimeters. This is again a fixed measurement. Then from the back waist, I measure downwards and this time 10 centimeters. This is the natural hip line and this is where most people wear their pants. Then once again from the back waist point, I measure down 21 centimeters and this is the actual hip line. This is the end point of a bodice square. I will be making the standard basic t-shirt pattern without fitting, and I will also show you how I add dots to create the fitted bodice. I mentioned before we need to add ease for our arm movement. So from point A1 I add 0.75 centimeters to the left. Now from that new point A4 I will indicate my back width, again according to my size chart. Now I transfer that measurement onto the back height line, since I will be indicating my armhole diameter and my bust width on the back height line. So now I indicate my armhole diameter and my bust width. Now I did notice that my armhole diameter was way too big. I accidentally input an extra 0 in between the 1 and the 7, so instead of 17 centimeters it was 107 centimeters. So you'll see me be a bit confused. So I went back to my measurement list in Seamly Me and I altered that measurement from 107 to 17. And you will see that seamlessly once I alter that measurement and save my file, it gives me a little pop-up and asks me if I want to sync measurements. I click yes, and the measurement is automatically adapted again from 107 to 17. Then, starting from my now correct armhole diameter, I indicate my bust width. This is the full width of our pattern. From here I can complete the square and draw the remaining guidelines I will need to complete my pattern. The pattern will be contained within the square. Once you start altering the pattern, you will of course be able to leave the square, but for the main bodice, this is the size of the pattern. I'm drawing all the lines I need to complete the pattern as well as the internal guidelines. You can see how the square is being divided into 3 parts. So now we're actually making the front of the pattern, the side and the back. This will be where the pattern pieces are contained. The next thing I do is extend my back height line by 1.5 centimeters, and this will help you to shape your armhole later. If you see my mouse moving to the right corner, I'm just changing the line thicknesses a bit. After that, I move on to my back neckline, and for that I need to indicate my neck circumference divided by 6. Again, if I don't say the full measurement, it means that the measurement is included in my measurement file and I don't have to know it by heart. So I take my neck circumference and divide it by 6. I will need this measurement later on, so I copy it so I have it ready to use again. Now from that new point A17, I need to go up the measurement we just calculated divided by 4. So instead of just recalculating everything, I take the length from A to A17, input that in my calculation using the function key, and divide it by 4. And now the good thing is, if I change my neck circumference from point A17, so instead of 8 centimeters to 12 centimeters, the A18 point, the new point we just created, will automatically get taller as well. And the other way around, if I make my neck circumference smaller, the line from point A18 will be shorter as well. Then I need to lower my shoulder line. Since I'm not using a shoulder cushion, this is a fixed amount of 2.25 centimeters. If I were to use a shoulder cushion, this would be less, but since there's no shoulder cushion, the standard amount is 2.25 centimeters. So I measured down 2.25 centimeters from point A15 and I extend that line 0.5 centimeters to the left. And I also put a mark at 0.5 centimeters from point A18. That's now point A21, which I connect with point A20 with a dashed line. Then I draw a slightly curved line from point A18 to point A20, which will be my shoulder line, making sure it lines up with the dashed line I drew earlier. Point A20 is the back shoulder point. I also draw the back neckline, making sure I get a nice curve. The next thing I have to do is connect the back neck point to the back waist line. And I have to transfer that length to the front plus 2 centimeters. So starting from point A11, I will measure up the measurement from the back neck point to the back waistline plus 2. This will be the front neck point, and from that point I again indicate my neck circumference to the right and downwards. So this is why I copied that measurement earlier, because I need the same measurement starting from point A12 to go to the right and downwards. Now I connect those 2 points and draw a perpendicular line in the middle 1 centimeter towards the bottom. Once I've done that, I will connect point A20 and A22 and draw my neckline. You may have noticed that I already said A20 earlier. Once you change the point name, the missing point number will be reused as next available number. So this is just a basic neckline, which is not comfortable at all. If you want to use this pattern, you have to at least deepen the neckline, or if you draft a corset, you just leave it out. But this will just press against your neck and not be wearable for a long time. From point A8, I measured down my bust height, which is a fixed number of 5 centimeters. Once you start making custom patterns, this amount can change. For this kind of standard patterns, it tends to be 5 centimeters. And from that bust height point, I measure towards the right my bust width divided by 10. This is the bust point. Here you can see me try changing the name of the back neck point, but since that point is being used in calculations, I can't actually change the name without breaking the program. So I get an error and I have to go back and undo that name change to be able to continue working on my pattern. If you want to change a name or delete a point that's being used for a different point, you first have to delete all the related points and curves before you can change the point in question. So you'll see me deleting the neckline until I reach the point where I can delete the front shoulder neck point, just to show you how many points and lines I have to delete before I can rename my back neck point. That's something you should keep in mind. If a point is being used or referenced, you cannot change it anymore. So you can see I can't even delete my back neck point because it's being used by the points for the front neckline. So then redraw all the lines. I could have used Ctrl Z, but it's never a bad idea to just practice and draw the lines again from scratch. So I again deepen the neckline by 1 centimeter and connect the 2 points to redraw my neckline, making sure I more or less go to that 1 centimeter point. The next step is to draft the bust dart and the armhole. And for that I first connect the front shoulder neck point with the bust point. Since I made this measurement file really quickly for this example, I noticed my armhole diameter was kind of wide. So I went back to a measurement chart and I again altered it a bit and made it smaller. This is really why I like using Seamly, because it just recalculates everything and you don't have to start over if you made a mistake somewhere. So now I measure upwards from point A7 to mark my sleeve insert point, which is again according to my size chart. And I need to transfer point A19 to the front armhole, which I forgot to do earlier. Normally I do this sooner, but yeah, I made it invisible and I forgot, so I'm doing it now. I need an arc from point A24 through point A25, so that's what I draw next. I take the arc tool and use the function key to choose a line length A24, A25. And for the radius of the arc, I set the first angle to 45 degrees and the second angle to 90 degrees. So because A25 was a transfer point from A19, I had to draw a new line between point A25 and A24 before being able to use that line in my calculation. Then I need to indicate 3.5 centimeters on that arc. So from point A25, I will draw a new arc with the radius being 3.5 centimeters and the angles being 345 degrees. This 3.5 centimeters is again a fixed amount. Then I mark the intersecting point of the two arcs, and I connect that point with point A24. Now I need to draw two bisector lines starting from point A7, one measuring 1 centimeter and the other measuring 1.5 centimeters. So now I draw my side seam at the half point between A7 and A6, minus 1 centimeter towards the front. Now I have all the points to draw my armhole, so I have to go from point A26 to point A24, in between point A27 and 28, to point A29, to point A16, to the back shoulder point. After drawing the armhole, I draw my side seam. Now I need to transfer the back shoulder seam to the front. So I need two new arcs. The first arc has to have a radius from the bust point to the front shoulder neck point, with the angles being 60 and 100 degrees. Then I need a second arc, with the radius being the length of the back shoulder line and the angles being 120 and 160 degrees. These degrees I found by trial and error. They can be different. As long as the arcs intersect, you're good. I again mark the intersection point and connect it to the bust point. So this is actually my bust dot. Now I'll make a groove for my arcs so I can hide them and have a cleaner pattern. Now I have to transfer my back shoulder seam to the front. To do that, I again go down 0.5 centimeters from point A26 towards the bust point. I connect a new point A31 with the front shoulder point with a dashed line and draw a slightly curved line from A26 to the front shoulder point, resulting in my front shoulder seam. Once you close this bust dot, point A26 will also be the front shoulder neck point. This is your very basic t-shirt pattern. If you sew this, it will be more like a potato bag. It won't be very comfortable, especially with the neckline. If you do want to sew this for a very baggy look, the least you should do is lower the neckline and maybe also lower the armhole a bit. So this pattern has no fitting in the front, the side or the back yet. You can select your pattern pieces and export them in different formats. So I tend to export them to SVG, so I can then edit them in Illustrator if I have to add some kind of intricate internal design, since Seamly is not the best for internal designs. So here I trace my pattern pieces and then I go to the other view mode where I can export or print them. This is your basic, sleeveless, very uncomfortable bodice pattern. Now we can add the dots to make a fitted bodice. I'm adding all the lines where I want to add my dots, so I will add a dot in the front, in the side seam and in the back. I want the back dot to be in the middle, so I'm adding a mark at the midpoint between A29 and the back height point. And I'm also extending that line downwards. For the side seam and the back seam, I need to draw the dot at the midpoint between A2 and the back waist point, so I add a mark at the midpoint. Even though this is a very basic bodice pattern, before I add any dots, I'm going to shape the back. Because even if you just sew this basic bodice, it's always nice to add some shape to the back unless you want to cut your pattern on a pattern fold. To do this, I mark 2 cm from point A2, the back waist point, and 1 cm from the hip point. Now to shape the back seam, I draw a curve through all the points of the back. I want to add this altered back seam to my bodice pattern, but instead of just redrawing the complete piece, I'm gonna add it with the internal line tool, so I can just add it directly to the back pattern. So now I have a basic t-shirt pattern with a fitted back if I were to cut out the curved line instead of the straight line. Next, I add all the points I need to draw my dots. And then I will check how wide my dots have to be. I now compare the waist width for my pattern with the waist circumference and my size chart divided by 2, since this is half a pattern, and check how much I have to take in the pattern piece. So I draw a line from point A13 to point A37, so I can see how wide the waistline is. I take the measurement of the line I just drew, minus my waist circumference divided by 2. Now this is just my waist circumference without any ease, so we'll subtract another 0.75 centimeters, because that's 1.5 centimeters ease in total, which is a good amount for a basic bodice pattern. So the resulting line indicates how wide the sum of all my dots has to be. Now, because this is my standard pattern, I will be using fixed measurements for my front dart, being 1 centimeter towards the left and 0.75 centimeters towards the right. I will change this later on, but I just want you to see what changes when using fixed measurements and when using calculations. So since the dot will be straight between those points, I connect them on either side. Now because that dot is fixed in the front, I have to subtract that amount from the A44 line. So I first did this with just typing in a measurement, but I will change that by typing in the line between A45 and A47. The line length of A44 is the full waist length of my pattern piece, minus my size chart waist circumference, minus 0.75 centimeters, minus the dart width in the front. I'm going to divide that line over the side and the back dart. And to do that, I take the measurement of that line and divide it by 4. And I do that for each side of the side and the back dart. Here you can see me changing the fixed measurement in the calculation to the actual line length of the front dart. Because I saw that my side dart and my back dart were going to be very small, so I decided to make the front dart a bit smaller. So again, because I first made that A44 line before adding the line from A45 to A46, I can't actually just include that measurement into the line because the reference aren't in the correct order, so I have to delete that line, first draw my front dart and then add my line to calculate my dart amount. It may be a bit confusing, but I didn't want to take it out because I think it shows that you should know your way around the pattern before you start altering things, and it's always good to just do it and then go back and redo it if you find something went wrong. So again, I take the full pattern waist length minus my size chart waist circumference divided by 2, minus the 0.75 centimeter ease, minus the width of the front dart. So this is now the total amount for my side and my back dart. And now I take that line and divide it by 4, so I can create both markings for my dart legs. So here I'm making my front dart smaller, and you can see that doing that makes the line indicating the full width of my other darts longer. And in turn, the side dart and the back dart get a little bit wider. When you start customizing your patterns, you can play with these dart amounts, but for now, I'm giving my side and back dart the same width. Then I add 0.5 centimeters to the side of each of those dart points. Next I need to check the hip width. So I check the hip width on my pattern piece and check if I need to add or remove anything. In this case I need to add a little bit of ease, so I decide to add 1 centimeter to each side of the side seam. Now be careful if you have to add width to your hip line, then you need to of course also cross the dots to the other side of the pattern piece. So your side front piece and your back piece cross over each other. Next I add all my curves to complete my dots. Once I've added all my curves, I have to add my straight guidelines. So once I've added all those curves and those straight lines, I start to shape my dots. The bust dot has to follow the shape of the bust, so the left dot leg first curves outwards. The right dot leg first curves inwards before curving outwards. The bottom dot legs should follow the natural shape of the hips. For the side seam, we have to do the same thing. The top of the dot has to first curve inwards for both dot legs. For the back dot, the dot legs just have to meet the guidelines. Now I made my guidelines half a centimeter for this pattern because it's a smaller size, but if it's a bigger size you can go up to 1 centimeter for the guidelines. It depends a bit on the pattern. So now we have our bodice pattern. I again trace all the pattern pieces. So you have the middle front, the side front and the back. Seamly 2D won't let you repeat the same point in one pattern piece, so just like I did earlier, I will add the dot in the back as an internal pattern piece line. This is now a fitted bodice pattern. On the left I have the basic bodice pattern without fitting, and on the right I have the basic bodice pattern with fitting. So now I have my fitted basic bodice pattern that I can use for my other patterns. And I almost forgot, but I wanted to show you what happens if I now size up my pattern or size it down. So you can see everything changes according to my size chart. I don't have to change a lot. I only would maybe have to change the dots and the hip line to see if it still fits, but otherwise I don't have to change a lot. so you can see me reshaping the armhole according to the sizes when needed. I hope this was useful and that will help you with your future pattern projects. So thank you for watching. Bye!